Hey guys, before we get started, let me tell you about Spotify for Podcasters. It is a great app that I use to actually put together my podcast episodes. I record them there and get them edited and trimmed and such. And then from there, I can actually put them on any podcasting platform that I may want to. So if podcasting is something that you feel you might be interested in, check out Spotify for Podcasters. Now, let's get on with the program. Welcome back, everyone, to the Calloused Hands podcast. We are part 2 of our series, and today's episode is going to be called thick-skinned, or having thick skin, and gossiping. Those are going to be like our main 2 focuses. So hopefully y'all are having a really good week. I am feeling absolutely wiped out, which is funny because actually I had a little bit of vacation time that I took during the Christmas week, and so I thought I would not feel so wiped out after having 2 holiday makeup weeks in a row at my job. Because see, if we have one holiday off, we have to make it up on that Saturday. So every year for Christmas and New Year's, we tend to have 2 holiday makeups back to back. This year, it was nice because it was technically a 3-2-1 situation. In my case, I took a couple extra days off, so I had a little bit more time to rest, but I still feel horrid. I'm incredibly tired, but we have coffee, and we are going to continue moving on. So we're going to find a different way to open the one article that we've been looking at through DwayneBryant.wordpress. I'm going to, first off, I start getting the article pulled up. So last week we discussed kind of like what we could do to be better encouragers and try to be there for our preachers and our content creators, etc. Today's we're covering a lot today in a sense, I guess. So I really kind of want to dive in quickly on all of this, especially with the article from DwayneBryant.wordpress. And again, the title of the article is 12 Things You Need to Know About Your Preacher. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to dive right on into number 4, because we covered number 1 through 3 last week. Members will gossip about the minister and his family. You'd like to think that members would be more spiritually mature, but no. Plenty of Christians will gossip about the minister. He will work hard to care about each person, even though he knows some of them would verbally stab him in the back in a heartbeat. I've been gossiped about, lied about, criticized without warrant, but I still had to keep a stiff upper lip about it. So did my wife, because if I reacted the way other people might be tempted to respond, I could have lost my job. There's so much in that statement that is it's a lot to think about, and this is going to be a real-time study, guys. So we're going to turn over to Proverbs 20:19. Whoever goes about slandering reveals secrets, therefore do not associate with a simple babbler. We're not supposed to speak to the people that are behaving as such and gossiping. And I think that it actually serves 2 purposes there. One, it's a pool of negativity and it's a sin, so it's gonna suck you in whether you realize it or not. To me, gossip is an easy trap for all of us to fall in, because what happens whenever you hear the words, "You know what I heard?" You're like, "Ooh, what did you hear?" And so then you start getting sucked into that, and it happens all the time at every workplace. So and so is making X amount of dollars. Well, so and so has so many vacation days. "Oh, did you hear what's happening with so and so and his like his wife, or so and so and her husband?" It's said all the time. It's constant. We're not supposed to be around those people, period. We're supposed to distance ourselves. And we're going to go deeper into the subject of gossiping here in a minute. But I think there's also a layer of protection on that too, because if they're saying these things behind people's backs to you, what are they saying behind your back to other people? I think of times in the past that I had been gossiped about at work, or have had negative things said about me behind my back, and I've heard about them. And I'm trying to grow as a Christian just as much as everybody else is, and it gets tough. Um, my role at my workplace is unique in a sense. Um, if somebody's gone, I cover routes. If everybody's there or what have you, I go out and I help people get done, and I go after missed stops. And if my supervisor is gone, then I'm filling in for the supervisor. And I think back to one time in particular where my supervisor was gone and the owner of the company was gone. So I was like the guy over a lot of the company, like everything in one particular section. I was the go-to, and it was daunting. And I'm getting to a point here. There was a lot of difficult things that I had to handle that week, and there have been times, like I said, where I've been gossiped about and everything, where people have went to my supervisor and have said things about me to my supervisor. And thankfully, my supervisor knows me good enough to know that I'm not going to do the things that had been said about me. And I've heard not all of the things. I'm sure that there's a layer there that is kept to protect me, because like we do that for people. So I have thick skin to a point, and that's the whole point that I was getting to is, we've talked about the people that gossip behind the content creators, but I also want to approach this for the content creators of where we're supposed to be. Uh, I think of the term, like water off of a duck's back. If you've ever looked at a duck's feathers, whenever they get wet, it beads and it runs off. It's really cool. That's how we need to be content creating wise. And like I tried to make it clear last week, if we need correction because we did say something that was actually wrong, it needs to be handled a certain way. And that I want to bring up another verse at that point, Matthew 18:15. If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother. If we have a problem with somebody, we should be able to go and talk to them about it. But how are we going and talking to them about it? And what is our hearts whenever we go to do that? Are we being mean and rude? Or is there a genuine care, and like it's, almost like sad and somber? And I know we can get angry whenever we're hurt. It's a justified reaction, but we got to remember that we have to watch how we control that anger. We have to do it uh, as a Christian would. And just because Jesus fashioned a whip and drove everybody, as far as the money changers goes, out of the temple, doesn't mean that we have the same justification if somebody picks the opposite color of songbooks that we wanted. They went with orange instead of blue, or whatever. We don't have any justification behind that. And so whenever we're approaching somebody, again, in a different sense, our hand needs to be in our heart. Like, hey man, you hurt this. you see this wound that was from you, and it bothers me that you did this, and you're supposed to clear this up. And if your brother is indeed your brother, they're going to listen to you. There's a lot going on with that whole D&D content creator that kind of started this, along with the Dwayne Bryant WordPress article, where things had been said to them online, and another guy that I follow is where I found out that the guy was quitting, and he put it in a really good way where you gotta let that stuff not bother you. So if somebody came to me and said that my podcast was boring, or they didn't like the way I sounded or whatever, I'm sorry, man. I talk the way I talk, and I structure my podcast the way I want to structure my podcast. Thank you for trying it out. I hope you find one down the road that you enjoy. I have to not let certain things get to me. Same with stuff at work. If you have people that are trying to get rises out of you and everything else, you need to just let it go. And it's easier said than done. It is so much easier said than done, believe me, because I am one that has had to work on my temper for years. I'm still working on my temper. I will be working on my temper until my last breath. I understand that, and I am thankful for the opportunity that I have to grow whenever it comes to that. But I want to let's look up a little bit more on gossiping, because I want to go to the New Testament, in particularly Ephesians 4:29. Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. If you're gossiping about somebody behind their back, are you doing that? Are you doing what the Bible is telling us to do? We're to build each other up. We're to be celebrating each other's victories. And how can we do that if we're tearing each other down and saying all these negative things? And we're not going to get anywhere if we're always fighting negativity. It's going to make it harder to get to a positive mindset. There has to be some positivity mixed in with, with the battling of the negativity, because negativity is expected. I think of a quote from a song. It's at the beginning of a song that I like a lot, where the artist says, "Don't get so distracted fighting the alligators that you forget to clean the swamp." Think about that for a second. Don't get so distracted fighting the alligators that you forget to clean the swamp. Yeah, the alligators will come and bother you and attack you, but what is an alligator's habitat? It's the swamp. So if you clean up the swamp and the swamp's gone, they no longer have a habitat. We have to get rid of this pool of negativity that we're all sitting in. If there is negativity around us, we're to be building each other up. And it's something that I started saying, and I think I may have already actually said it in this podcast, about celebrating victories. If one of us is doing good, and it should be this way at work too, and us as Christians, we need to be setting this example. I know last week I mentioned like the LGBTQ community, and if like somebody posts something, how should we respond? I wanna make this clear. Sin is sin, and we can't call it anything else. But we can still approach everyone with an amount of love and of grace, because such for some of you, like I had mentioned last week. So we need to definitely be doing that to each other, and we need to be setting the example on that, because Ephesians 4:29, let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths. That's any kind of corrupting talk, where it's slander, cursing, dirty jokes, whatever. We can do better, and we have another day to grow. That's why, it's the whole point of being here. The whole point, remember the prosperity gospel episode? Our We're not prosperous here. Our rewards are up in heaven. And if we want to get those rewards, we need to make sure that we're conducting ourselves as such. I want to go ahead and read number 5. Members will challenge the preacher in his knowledge of Scripture. How many hours do you think a preacher normally spends in the Bible? It's roughly 30 to 35 hours a week in sermon and class preparation. But he will be treated way less than that, sometimes with condescension. I had this guy in particular that wrote the article. I had one member who would ask me questions, and if I didn't answer them the way she wanted, read in a way that agreed with her, she would throw her hands up in the air and walk off in frustration. Is that a way we were supposed to be as Christians? It was put best in our Sunday morning Bible class that I was in this past week, like this past Sunday, where we need to be approaching things with an open mind and an open heart. And I brought up something along the same lines last week in a class that I taught, where, and I prefer the way I put it, just because it's the way I put it is how I understand things better, I guess. I just like the way I worded it, I guess. I don't know. The guy did a great job in explaining it, but if I'm going to put it this way because it's the way I put it, if I see something in the Bible as one way, and I find out that I'm looking at it the wrong way, and it's not God's way, but it was my way that I was looking at it, what needs to change? I need to change. It's not about me. It's not about my opinions. It's not about me at all in any form. It's God's word. I am here to serve God. I need to set down my feelings and do what I am called to do. Whenever we go to the Bible, whenever it's a biblically related thing at all, whenever we go to the Bible, it should not be, well, I think. It should be, well, it says. Because it's not our opinions. It is what has been dictated to us. And don't think of that in a negative way whenever I say that it's dictated to us. You dictate a letter, is what I'm getting at, not as in like a dictatorship. He is our King and our Lord, and we should look at him with reverence and such. But in this case, I'm talking about in the writing sense, where the Bible is a letter that is dictated to us of instruction, and we need to follow said instruction. It is God breathed, it is God inspired, and the people that are doing these things to these preachers definitely need growth. I can understand if I'm going to save that thought for towards the end of the series, but there's a thought there that will be addressed with that. But we need to. What good is it if we throw our hands up and walk away like that lady? Are we solving anything? We're looking extra dramatic, but that's about it, isn't it? We're not getting anything accomplished. He goes on in saying, I had another member who would email me questions about my sermons. He didn't listen very well because he would often get the opposite impression of what I said and then call me to account for it and sometimes complain to the elders. If you have an issue with somebody, go to them. I don't want to say it's not that hard, but I guess it's not that hard. I mean, these guys that are going to our pulpits and preaching to us and bringing us lessons, they're working hard to do so, and we should show them how much we appreciate them. There's so much that goes into even just preparing for a class. even just preparing to do these podcasts. Yeah, I'm doing a real-time study with you guys and going over these different things. But as I'm doing these things, like, or prior to doing these things, I guess is how I should word it, I'm like thinking of where I want to go in my head, getting a general idea of what I'm wanting to do, thinking about scriptures, recalling scriptures, going to scriptures prior to, and then sometimes I save them, like the ones where I read the verses prior to starting my lesson. Yes, obviously. But even in these situations, I'll be like, I want to go look at this verse real quick and see what it says, just to make sure that I'm going where I want to go. But we cannot handle ourselves that way. Let's pull up a verse on frustration real quick. Let's go to James 1:19. We've been to this verse before, but it's such a good verse. Know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger, for the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. Therefore, put away all filthiness and rampant wickedness, and receive the meekness, the implanted word, which is able to save your souls. So, that lady from the article, even the guy, they're not being slow to anger, are they? At least from the knowledge that we have. Is that how we're behaving? Or are we conducting ourselves in a more appropriate manner? This is a moment of self-reflection. Think about how you've handled things within the past year. It's a new year. We can do better. It's a new day. We can do better. We need to take things day by day, which is going to be something that we will be discussing a lot in future episodes. We have a lot on our plates as Christians. I get it. Because we are required to be not of this world. We're to be lights. We're to be like salt. We're to so on and so forth. So we have to be noticeably different. If we're throwing our hands up in frustration at like the slightest thing, or if we're not getting our way or whatever, is that like a Christian, or is that being like the world? If we send nasty anonymous letters, if we get on somebody's podcast page or YouTube page or whatever, somebody that is trying to put out clean content for Christians and say all kinds of just horrible things to them that aren't concerning Scripture. And even if it's concerning Scripture, should we be addressing it in a horrible way? I used a buddy of mine as a example last week in a sense, and I started thinking about how I had recorded it, and I called him up and I was like, hey man, I used you as an example for the episode, and I don't like. I want to give you warning prior to, because I don't want it to hurt you, because I know it's not how you said it. I know you did it with love and everything else. I've known this guy for a long while, and he is definitely one of those people that could come to me and address things, and I know where he's coming from. He and another guy from that same congregation, because it's a congregation I used to go to, those two guys could come to me, and I can almost, it could be through a text, it could be in person, whatever. I could guarantee you I know exactly where they're coming from because of the relationship that I have / had with them. And they're two of like the coolest guys ever, and they're good brothers. There are people out there that do care and want it done right, and they're, they come to you with that love. I guess I'm talking to the content creators here at the moment that might be listening, and we need to be encouraged by those people because they cared enough. But then we also have to have thick skin to handle whenever people, and this even applies to just people who teach a class, dealing with people at work, whatever. We do need to have a degree of having a thick skin, and we see that several times where let's let's go to Matthew. Let's go to Matthew 19, because there's a great example there, and then I want to go to one more too after that. So let's go to Matthew 19, and let's start at verse 7. They said to him, "Why then did Moses command one to give a certificate of divorce and to send her away?" And he said to them, "Because of your hardness of heart, Moses allowed you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery." Now, the Pharisees constantly tested Jesus. This is just one example, but I wanted to come to it because it shows us a point where he had thick skin in a very positive way, because you can also have thick skin in a very negative way, much like anything else, where you can not care, but then you can not care, you know, where you're rude, you're abrasive, and it comes off completely wrong. We have to make sure that we're handling ourselves accordingly, because if we're expecting if we are expecting people to approach us accordingly, we need to be approachable accordingly and respond accordingly, because we're trying to set Christian examples, because we're trying to get people to see where we're coming from. And this is all Christians, not just content creators, not just people who are listening to things or watching things made by people or what have you, because we may like people that are out there in the world who are YouTube people, people on Facebook, whatever, TikTok, you name it. Are we being encouraging to them? Not saying you have to comment on everybody's page, leave a review for everything, whatever, which, by the way, reviews are much appreciated, and follows and subscriptions are very much appreciated. But the point is, you don't have to do that every time to everyone, because that would take up a lot of time, and I get that. But if you see a moment where you can inspire and encourage, that's a door. Are we going through that door? Hey, man, that was a great hunt. I learned a lot from it. Thank you. It can be as simple as that. And I was thinking about that in particularly because I love watching hunts on YouTube, and the hunting season's pretty well wound down, and I'm kind of bummed out about it. But I've got plans in the works, and like I've actually taken more time away from doing my second job in order to make these podcasts and everything else here lately, because everything has just been so chaotic. But I'm so happy doing this, because this is what I want to do. I want to be creative. I want to be creating content, and it makes me very happy. But I do need to get back to work too. But we're doing this, those of us that do these things, because we enjoy them, and we want to help other people enjoy what we enjoy. It's a great preaching tool. That's why I'm doing this podcast. It's a great preaching tool. It gives me another opportunity to maybe reach someone, which is actually a great. I wanted to go to one more verse, so let me get to that one more verse or passage. We're going to go to 1 Timothy, and we're going to start at verse 18, and we're going to go through 20 of 1 Timothy chapter 1. So let's start off in verse 18 of chapter 1. This charge I entrust to you, Timothy, my child, in accordance with the prophecies previously made about you, that by them you may wage the good warfare, holding faith and good conscience. By rejecting this, some have made shipwreck of their faith, among whom are Hymenaeus and Alexander, whom I have handed over to Satan, that they may learn not to blaspheme. Timothy had to read this letter in front of a congregation. That had to have been hard. That took some thick skin, didn't it? There's a lot to having thick skin, and I think we need to keep that in mind, that it's a challenge. Being a Christian is a challenge, because think about it. having thick skin doesn't just apply, like I've said several times, to content creators and everything else, because it does come from outside of the church as well. Don't forget all of these things. These are all important, and I have repeated myself a few times because all of these things are important. Because it can come from all over, but it shouldn't be coming from the church. It should not be coming from the body. Think about it, and because the church has been referred to as the body, think about if your own body is attacking itself. That's not good. It doesn't feel good. It's not a good feeling when you're sick. That is essentially what we are doing when the congregation has issues within itself. Will we not see eye to eye on everything? That's a given. But we can do so much together to be as much on the same page as possible, even though we're all growing at different rates and we're all at different places. We can care for each other, we can care for the preacher, and so on. Now let's get to number 6. He is on call 24/7. The preacher is the point man for the congregation. If someone needs to get into the building but doesn't have a key, or needs to help prepare for a wedding, or if delivery needs to be made, the ministers are the go-to guys. They often babysit the church building because they're the paid staff, even though it's never part of the job description. According to statistics, the average minister works at least 50 hours a week. In 2020, during the COVID scare, it was far worse. I routinely worked 65 to 75 hours a week. They don't have an end to their workday, and 3-day weekends are about as common as seeing a real-life unicorn. They rarely get a day off, which might even include their time on vacation. Even when taking personal time for some needed R&R, people can still call the minister for advice or for mundane things that someone else could take care of. I've spent entire vacations fielding calls almost daily from church members who knew I was out of town. This contributes to burnout, one of the most common reasons why ministers quit. All right, let's start off with an obvious. No, I don't want to start off with an obvious one. Hang on. Mark 2:27. Let's start off there. Then Jesus said to them, "The Sabbath was made for humankind, and not humankind for the Sabbath." Okay, obviously, Sabbath was a Jewish day of rest, but they worked the other 6 days of the week. Everybody needs rest, is the point I'm getting at with this one. So let's establish that. Everybody needs rest. Think about it with your jobs. It drives me nuts whenever I'm filling in for my supervisor and people call him because the dude's trying to get away from the job for a minute. Like, let the guy rest. Come to me while he's gone. I need rest after he gets back, but we need time away. There are other people in the congregation that can handle things. Elders, if there's no elders there, then there's other brothers in the congregation that you can go to. And I want to circle back to this one if I can remember to, because there's another point in this article later on that's going to come up where this one I can hook back to and have a really good explanation for a few things. But let's continue establishing why rest is so important. Mark 6:31 through 32. Jesus said to them, "Come away to a deserted place all by yourselves and rest a while, for many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And they went away in the boat to a deserted place by themselves." Jesus took time to rest when he needed it. And this isn't the only place. I think about where he went up the mountain by himself to like just chill for a minute. And it's important that we take a minute to rest. Like, it's been shown to us from the beginning. Like, go to Genesis 2. And on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all his work that he had done in creation. If our God needed rest, even if it's just for a day, shouldn't we allow people to rest? I'm not saying to slack way off on a preacher, but to expect him to be like some sort of superhero is just mind-boggling. Do you want to work 24/7, never having a vacation? Not saying you work a lot and then you take a vacation because you've worked a lot. No, working a lot and then never taking a vacation. Is that what we're expecting of our preachers? Obviously, for big important things, a preacher should be noted. But if it's something that somebody else can handle while he takes his minute of rest, we should be able to step up and do that. We all need rest. I'm not just saying that for preachers, because we're getting to a point where in just a few weeks, I've got it planned out. At the end of this series, I'm going to take a 2-week break because I need rest. But am I actually going to rest? I don't know. Because I may actually use it to try to get ahead a little bit. But rest will be coming in some form or another for me during that time period. I'm going to take some time to rest a little because I need it, because I've been going so hard between doing this, that, and everything else. And it's okay to take time to take a breather. I thought that I was going to need a whole episode just to talk about that because rest is so important. We've seen Elijah where he was so burnt out and so depressed, where he slept and ate, and that is all he did for a time. And the angels were waking him up and feeding him, essentially, because he was so wore out. Do we want our preachers to be so burnt out that they don't want to do this anymore? We have an issue in our in our church, in the church, in his church, where people are, where brothers are not wanting to preach anymore. Is that what we want? We are wearing these men out and causing them to want to not do it anymore. They're not wanting to spread God's word. How awful is that? Think about it for a minute. And I know that there may be somebody out there going, well, you said to have thick skin. Yeah. Maybe you need the thick skin in this moment. Or maybe you actually need softer skin in this moment where this is pricking your heart because you are somebody that is bulldogging your preacher at your congregation or our brethren, however you want to put it. We're a team, guys. We're a body. We need to be working together. This one I knew was going to be a bit harder and a bit more on the oof side, where it was a bit more rough than what I had wanted it to be. But I feel like it needed to be had. We're going to be on the building upside, I think, for the next one. But there's a lot that can be gleaned from this and be positives. We've addressed issues. We know where we can change. We can make the modifications, much like a football coach will do at halftime, much like a crew chief for a NASCAR race team will do whenever they make a pit stop. Same with off-road racing and everything. You make your adjustments and you move on. Let's make our adjustments and let's move on in a better way. Let's move on down the trail of being Christians together as a family, as a unit, off-roading on this tight trail together, and continue towards the goal. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. I look forward to having you guys here for part 3 of this amazing series that I'm learning a lot from, and I hope that you are too. Be blessed, and I will see you back here on the Calloused Hands podcast.